What if I told you there were 3 ways that can help you increase your credit score? So I'm sure you guys have all heard that you need to have a good credit score, you shouldn't be late on your payments, you need to pay off your credit cards, or you shouldn't have so many hard inquiries, you shouldn't apply for so much, blah, 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 right? I'm sure you guys have heard of them all. These next 3 things that I'm gonna share with you guys are 3 things that will help you guys within those 6 categories to improve them and be able to give you a better credit score overall. Now, you can focus on those 6 categories, or you can just focus on these 3 things, right? At the end of the day, these 3 main focuses will help increase all those 6 categories, which again, in the hands, will give you a better credit score. But before I give you these 3 things that you need to focus on to increase your credit score, let me just give you the 6 categories that credit bureaus look at to determine your credit score. The first thing that they look at is, how are you paying your credit cards on time, right? Is this person actually paying on time, or are they paying late? That is super important. That's one of the most important things. The second thing is your credit card usage, is what percentage of your total credit limits are you using? Example, you have $1,000 credits, you have a $100 balance, that means you're using 10% of your credit limit. The third thing that they look at is your credit card age. Fourth thing that they look at is your derogatory marks, right? And that can be pretty much anything, example like late payments. The fifth thing that they look at is how many total accounts do you have opened? And the sixth thing is how many hard inquiries do you have, which is simply how many times are you applying for credit and you are getting denied or accepted, right? Regardless, they track all those. So if you have all 6 of those categories good, then most likely your credit score will be good, right? But again, if you focus on these 3 neat things that I'm gonna tell you guys, it will help ease into not having to focus on all those things and simply just being able to focus on the main thing, which is maintaining your credit score. Having a good credit score is very, very important, right? Believe it or not, it's not just to be able to get a car, which is great and all, everybody wants a car, but at the same time, if you wanna get a place to rent or a house to buy, you need to have a good credit score. But even more important, what I think a lot of people fail to realize because they don't understand how the financial markets work, or the financial world, I should say, is the fact that if you have really good credit and good credit history and a really high score, you are then able to leverage what's called OPM, which is other people's money, right? We talk about leverage all the time in this channel, and we're also gonna talk about OPM, which is honestly a way that helped me start off as an entrepreneur, which is risky, I will say, but it was easier to start being able to leverage other money, right? So when you have a good credit history, you are able to apply for business credit cards, say for example, 0% cards, borrow that money for 12 months or 18 months and pay no interest. Think about that. Can you imagine putting $10,000 in your card and you're paying 17% interest yearly? That's kind of high, right? But could it be worth it if you invest it properly? Now imagine you're able to get that money at 0% interest. Just think about that. You can borrow $10,000 at 0%. What would you be able to do with that, right? Literally anything. If you invest it right, you can make pretty good money even if it's $10,000. Before we even get there, right? What does it really take to be able to do that? Right? It's actually pretty simple. All you really need is to have a high credit score. And if you have a high credit score, chances are you will get accepted, right? I like to recommend people to have a 750 and above. Usually 720, they say is pretty manageable to be able to get really good cards such as American Express, 0% interest business cards or personal cards. 720 for sure works. Let's get to the juicy part. I know that sounds pretty, that all sounds good. You guys have probably heard a lot about that stuff, but what should I really be focusing on within my credit to be able to get that high score all the time? Well, let me share with you guys. Now, one of the most important things that I think people fail to realize is you need to pay off your credit card fully every single time, right? You might think, well, what's the point of having a $10,000 credit card if I can't max it out and pay it out over 30 months? Well, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's what it's there for. You might have an emergency, whether it's in your business or whether it's your personal life, right? Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you want to get this cool looking sofa in your house, right? There's a lot of reasons to it. But at the end of the day, the credit card bureaus are looking at your credit percentage usage, right? So if you have a $10,000 credit card and you have another $10,000 credit card, let's pretend you have 2, and you are maxing out one of them, that means you are using 50% of your credit limits. That is really, really bad, right? And if you are able to pay everything off on time, you are helping multiple categories within the 6 that I mentioned, where A, your credit utilization will be low, B, you will pay it on time and you won't be late, right? So now think about that. If you are able to do that every single time, you are maintaining that score high and you're also staying disciplined, right? But what else does that do? If you are able to keep that percentage low and your score is always looking good, you could potentially leverage getting more cards and keep increasing the overall limit that you have. Now within that card, but more so having more cards, right? What if you're always paying those off, and not only can you increase the limit within those cards, but you can also apply for more, right? That is very, very powerful. And I think people fail to realize is you are thinking more so in the short term, right? Which we all tend to do, versus the long term. And if you focus more on the long term within anything that you do, which we've talked about this a lot, you will be further off, more successful than anybody else, regardless of what you are doing, right? Same thing with credit. If you are focusing on, hey, let me just pay off this card now, I'm gonna have less money, but if my credit score is high, I could potentially leverage that to get more cards and then eventually leverage that to make more money. The next thing, and honestly one of my favorite ones, is this hack that I wish I would have known when I was young. And that's basically getting somebody to add you as an authorized user on one of their credit cards. Now you might think, well, why would anybody want to do that? Well, you're right, most people wouldn't, but your dad might, your mom might, your friends might, your brother, your sister, right? There's always somebody out there who would be willing to do it, always, no matter what. Even if you say, my parents don't support me, my friends don't think that way, they think it's a bad choice. Hey, that might be true, and maybe they do think that way, and it just is what it is. But I guarantee if you really look and you keep looking, eventually you'll find somebody. It might be hard for some of you guys, 100%, but guess what? There are actually companies out there that will charge you a fee and they can add you onto some of these cards, right? Now imagine if you can't get a friend to do it for free, maybe you could pay $500 and be able to get added onto one of these credit cards. Now you're an authorized signer on those cards. It shows up on your credit score, and your credit score jumps. Now what is that gonna do? That's gonna help a lot of factors within the 6 that I mentioned earlier if you're able to get added on as an authorized signer. Example, if you have $20,000 in overall credit, you get added onto a third one, and say it's also $10,000, you now have $30,000 of total credit. 30,000 is way better than 20. Might not be that big of a difference, but if you keep stacking those limits will keep increasing. The second thing, you're also gonna be able to keep your utilization score a lot lower, right? Because if you had 20,000 prior and we're using 50% of that, right? Say we had mentioned you had a $10,000 card maxed out and you're using 50% of that. Now with 30,000, you're really only using 33%. 33% still bad, but notice how that percentage decreases, right? So at the same time, what if that credit card that they add you onto is, say, a 10-year-old credit card, right? And your cards are an average of 1 year old, right? You add all 3 of those up, that's 13 years divided by 3. Your average credit score history is now somewhere around 4 years. Think about that. You went from 1 year to 4 years. Well, that one tip alone can help a lot of those categories increase. Again, those categories increase, they become stronger, your overall credit score will go up. And the next tip that I think can help a lot of you guys, and again, some of you guys might not even know this, a lot of you probably are already doing it, right? And that's something as simple as asking for a credit card limit increase. Most of the credit cards that you have, you're able to ask for an increase after 6 months of having it, right? There's people out there, people such as me, where I had cards for years and I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know that I can simply go online and ask for a credit increase, right? Some companies don't have that. Some companies you have to call, they put you in the credit card department, you ask for an increase. But again, if your credit score is good and all 6 categories are decent and you're over a 720, 750, chances are you will get that credit card increase if you ask for it. Now, obviously you have to make sure that you're in good standing within that company, your credit score is good, but if you're paying off your card on time and your credit score is high and your limits are low and you've never had a late payment with this actual company or even any other company, you have a very high success chance of getting that limit increased. Let's go back to our same example, right? You have 2 cards, $10,000 each, right? And then you ask for an increase. You're gonna go from 20,000 to maybe 25,000. One of your cards will now be 15,000 versus 10,000. It might not sound like much and you might think, well, what am I gonna do with an extra 5? An extra 5 can go a long way to a lot of people. And again, we talk about this all the time as well. You have to take small steps to get to the end goal, right? You're never gonna climb the mountain by just jumping on top of it, right? You're gonna take one step at a time and eventually you're gonna get there. It's the same thing with credit. Everything is that same way. Like if you really just have that same mindset within everything, you're gonna get there. Now again, you went from 10,000 to 20,000, 25,000. Now I'm gonna go apply for another credit card, right? I'm gonna ask for an increase on that one too in the next 6 months. So if you're able to ask for increases within the cards that you have, it will also help within all the categories that we talked about. Right? So your main focus should always be to make sure those 6 categories are good. But if you implement these 3 tips, there is no reason why all 6 of those categories won't be strong. Now, there is a downfall to asking for credit increases where you might get a hard inquiry. Luckily though, hard inquiries are not that big of an effect on your overall credit score. And at the same time, not all credit card companies put a hard pull on your credit report for asking for a credit card increase. Usually they give you a soft pull, which basically means it will not show up on your credit score, which is great. And even if you did get a hard pull, usually they fall off after 6 months and credit bureaus aren't able to look at them, or banks, which will then increase your credit score back up. So they're not that big of a deal. Sometimes they could be worth it, sometimes they won't, right? If you apply for a bunch of credit cards and maybe a lot of limit increases recently, like within the past 2 to 3 months, then maybe it won't be the best idea to ask for a limit at that time, right? You might have too many hard inquiries. Maybe you might have to wait a few months, but that's okay, right? It's still worth asking for those increases, especially if you know you're not gonna get a hard pull. At the end of the day, if you have really good credit score, it is one of the most important things that you can do as a person to help you in the long run to be able to become more successful. Thank you guys again for tuning in. If you guys are looking for investment opportunities, please click the link below. Somebody on my team will contact you for a potential partnership. Please don't forget to like and subscribe the video. Thank you guys. See you later.